Millions of documents, names, orders, records of unimaginable crimes, all of it carefully typed, stamped, and filed by a regime that believed it would rule for 1,000 years. When Nazi Germany collapsed, these files should have told us everything. Instead, many of them vanished into mine shafts, castles, and secret vaults, and some remained hidden from the public for over 70 years. This is the story of the secret files of Nazi Germany. Before we continue, if you're enjoying these deep dives into World War II history, please follow our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It genuinely helps us keep bringing you these stories, and we'd love to have you as part of this journey. Now, let's step back into the final chaotic weeks of Nazi Germany in 1945. For over a decade, the Nazi regime had built one of the most extensive bureaucratic systems in modern history. Every arrest, every deportation order, every military decision, every act of persecution, all of it was meticulously documented, typed, stamped, and filed away in government offices across Germany. This obsessive record-keeping reflected something deeply characteristic of the Nazi state itself, an almost pathological need for order, documentation, and control, even, disturbingly, when documenting its own worst atrocities in careful, methodical detail. As Allied forces closed in on Germany from both east and west in early 1945, Nazi officials faced an urgent, frightening question. What should be done with the millions of documents that could serve as damning evidence of the regime's crimes once the war finally ended? Some officials received direct orders to destroy incriminating records entirely, and throughout the war's final weeks, massive bonfires burned outside government buildings across Germany, as clerks and soldiers frantically fed paper after paper into the flames. But destroying millions upon millions of documents proved logistically impossible in the limited time available. Paper doesn't burn quickly enough, especially not the enormous, meticulously organized archives that decades of Nazi bureaucracy had accumulated. Faced with this impossible task, many officials instead chose to hide their records rather than destroy them, believing perhaps that the war might still somehow turn in Germany's favor, or simply hoping to protect themselves from future accountability by controlling access to incriminating evidence. Some of the most sensitive and significant documents were transported to remote, secure locations, abandoned salt mines deep underground, isolated castles in the countryside, and secret underground bunkers specifically chosen for their inaccessibility and protection from bombing raids. One particularly significant hiding location was an abandoned salt mine near the town of Merkers in central Germany, where Nazi officials had stored not only enormous quantities of gold and looted artwork, but also crates upon crates of sensitive government documents. When American forces discovered this mine in April 1945, they found an almost unbelievable treasure trove, not just of stolen wealth, but of paperwork that would eventually prove crucial in understanding exactly how the Nazi regime had organized its horrific campaigns of persecution and genocide. Similar discoveries occurred throughout Germany as Allied forces advanced. Soldiers repeatedly stumbled upon hidden archives in unexpected locations, buried in gardens, sealed inside walls, stored in remote farmhouses, wherever officials had desperately tried to keep their paper trails from Allied hands. As these documents were gradually recovered, Allied intelligence officers quickly recognized their extraordinary value. These weren't just historical curiosities, they were detailed evidence, meticulously documenting exactly how the Nazi regime had planned, organized, and executed its crimes. This captured documentation became absolutely crucial evidence during the Nuremberg Trials, held between 1945 and 1946, where surviving high-ranking Nazi officials were formally prosecuted for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the systematic genocide of 6 million Jewish people. Prosecutors relied heavily on captured Nazi paperwork, orders signed by officials, meeting minutes, transportation records for concentration camp deportations, presenting overwhelming documentary proof that made denial of these crimes genuinely impossible for the accused. Yet despite this significant recovery effort, historians and researchers gradually realized that not every document had been found. Some archives remained genuinely missing, their exact locations unknown, their contents a continuing mystery for decades following the war's conclusion. One particularly significant category of missing documents involved records related to Germany's various intelligence agencies, the Gestapo, the SS, and military intelligence services, many of which had taken extraordinary precautions to protect or destroy their most sensitive operational files. As the Cold War began developing in the years immediately following World War II, an unexpected complication emerged. Both the United States and the Soviet Union recognized that certain captured Nazi intelligence, particularly regarding Soviet territory and military capabilities, held genuine ongoing strategic value. This meant that certain captured documents, rather than being made publicly available for historical research or war crimes prosecution, were instead classified by Western intelligence agencies, considered too strategically valuable to release during the emerging tensions of the Cold War era. Perhaps most notably, the United States recruited numerous former Nazi intelligence officers directly into American intelligence operations, particularly those specializing in Soviet affairs, individuals who brought with them extensive knowledge and files gathered during years of wartime espionage. This controversial practice, prioritizing immediate Cold War intelligence advantages over full historical transparency and accountability, meant that certain records connected to these individuals remained classified for decades, protected specifically to avoid embarrassing revelations about this uncomfortable post-war arrangement. One particularly significant example involved Klaus Barbie, a former Gestapo officer responsible for numerous wartime atrocities in France, who was secretly recruited by American intelligence after the war, with his connection to certain intelligence operations remaining classified for many years afterward. Similarly, the CIA's own historical archive on Nazi war criminals, including detailed information about numerous individuals recruited for intelligence purposes after the war, remained substantially classified for decades, only gradually becoming available to historians and researchers beginning in the late 1990s. The Interagency Working Group, established by the United States Congress in the late 1990s, specifically to review and declassify Nazi war crimes records, eventually released millions of pages of previously classified documents, revealing extensive details about post-war intelligence relationships with former Nazi officials. This massive declassification effort, though occurring over 50 years after the war's conclusion, provided historians with genuinely new insights into exactly how extensively Western intelligence agencies had utilized former Nazi personnel and their accumulated knowledge during the early Cold War period. Meanwhile, in East Germany, under Soviet occupation and later communist rule, An entirely different set of captured Nazi documents followed a completely separate historical path, often used for different political purposes, entirely by the East German government. The Stasi, East Germany's notorious secret police, reportedly utilized certain captured Nazi records and methodologies in developing their own extensive surveillance systems, creating an uncomfortable historical continuity between two very different, yet methodologically similar, authoritarian intelligence structures. Beyond intelligence records, another significant category of missing or delayed documentation involved records related to stolen art, looted property, and financial assets seized from Jewish families and other victims throughout Nazi-occupied Europe during the war. Many of these financial and property records remained scattered, incomplete, or difficult to access for decades, significantly complicating efforts by surviving victims and their descendants to reclaim stolen property or seek appropriate compensation for their tremendous wartime losses. It would take until the late 1990s and early 2000s, following renewed international pressure and coordinated research efforts, before many banks, museums, and government archives across Europe began seriously and systematically addressing these long-neglected historical property claims. Germany itself established significant archives, specifically dedicated to preserving and studying these recovered historical records, including the extensive Bundesarchiv, Germany's federal archive, which today houses millions of pages of surviving Nazi-era documentation. Researchers and historians continue working through these vast archives even today, gradually piecing together fuller, more complete understandings of exactly how the Nazi regime operated, and uncovering previously unknown details about specific individuals, operations, and decisions made during this devastating historical period. This ongoing archival work has proven genuinely important, not just for historical understanding, but for practical purposes too, helping identify previously unknown victims, clarifying disputed property claims, and occasionally even assisting in locating war criminals who had successfully evaded justice for decades. The story of these secret files reminds us that history itself is often incomplete, that even seemingly thorough historical records can remain hidden, classified, or scattered for generations, gradually revealing their full significance only through patient, persistent research conducted long after the events themselves occurred. Even today, historians believe additional records likely remain undiscovered somewhere, in private family collections, forgotten government storage facilities, or archives that simply haven't yet been fully catalogued and reviewed, meaning this particular historical mystery may never be entirely, completely resolved. Thanks so much for watching. If this untold story about hidden history surprised you, please leave a comment below, follow our Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more untold stories from World War II. Until next time, take care.